Trey, we turn now to the reports from Tuscaloosa, and this is a fascinating conversation. You and I were talking about this a little bit, maybe a day or two ago, after listening to some other media outlets talk about it, discuss the rumors surrounding Kalen DeBoer, what he's going to do with the offense, what he's going to do with Jalen Milroe. Well, a couple days later, The Athletic comes out with an interview with Kalen DeBoer, kind of a state of affairs down there in Tuscaloosa. What's changed? What hasn't? What did you take away from that article? And, what do you kind of see as the status quo now for Alabama? What can they expect with Kalen DeBoer?
Well, he's going to run his offense, it seems like, right? And I think it's going to be, there's obviously going to be some tweaks. I think he's a good enough coach to know that you need to coach to the players that you have and not just try to fit a square peg in the round hole if it's not going to work. But what I'm really concerned about, and what I even told you, Mitch, before this article even came out, is do we think Jalen Milroe can run what Michael Penix Jr. ran at Indiana and at Washington, right? That just seems like, to me, to a very untrained eye, two very different styles of quarterback. You got Jalen Milroe, who's a fantastic athlete, a really good college quarterback, but not as polished of a passer. He has a howitzer of an arm. He can chuck it downfield 80 yards maybe if he gets to step into it a little bit. But the accuracy, the mid-range game that was such a big part of Michael Penix's success at Washington, I just don't see it on what Jalen Milroe's put on tape. That doesn't mean he can't learn it. That doesn't mean he can't develop it under Kalen DeBoer, because Kalen DeBoer has shown that he can develop quarterbacks really, really well. But what we've seen already gives me a little bit of cause of concern. I don't know that he's the guy to run that offense. And it's going to be really interesting as spring ball heats up, summer practices, the reports we get out of Tuscaloosa of how that marriage ends up working.
Garrett, it's fascinating because you look at what Kalen DeBoer has had recent success with, and it's big arm quarterbacks, but they're pocket passers. They've got their feet work all aligned. They know how to jump from read to read, right? It's not a lot of mental processing back there trying to extend the play. Although Penix, certainly had brief glimpses of that, but typically he was getting the ball out quick, or they had something designed where the scheme took the safety away and Penix was able to throw that ball deep. That's not necessarily the MO of Jalen Milroe. And so even though DeBoer's quoted in this article saying he's open to relearning, he's working, he's in there in the facility at 4 a.m. He's the first one in, last one out, real gym rat, great coach speak. He's open and willing to relearn all of that, but it certainly hasn't stopped the rumor mill from swirling that, oh, well, DeBoer's clearly got to go in a different direction. Do you give any validity to that, or is the tide still headed in the right direction with Jalen as QB1?
They should head that direction with Jalen. And we talked about this a little bit last year. The amount that he grew from the beginning of the season to the end of the season was remarkable. The work that he put in, the coaching he received, amazing what he was able to do from basically starting the season as this guy with, a huge arm and no accuracy to, if you watch some of those games at the end of the season, especially a couple passes he made in the Rose Bowl, there were some really, really impressive shots that he took, and not just deep shots, but really, really good mid-range, really, really good sort of, towards the sideline, needs to hit a guy in a tight window, and he does. And look, that's against an amazing Michigan defense, so obviously not the best day for him. But, who's not going to have a pretty rough day against Michigan's defense from last year? Aside from that, the work that he's put in, the athleticism that he brings to the table, his ability to extend plays, his ability to create on his own, if they're giving that away and they're going to say, well, no, it doesn't really fit our scheme, then somebody else in college football is about to become much, much richer at the quarterback position when Jalen Milroe transfers to their team, because he's good enough to play at, I would say, 95 to 99% of the schools that he could transfer to. There's a few quarterbacks across the country you could maybe argue are better, but I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I think that if you are DeBoer and you're, coming in and you're having to figure out roster transition and you're figuring out all these new pieces and how to work with the fan base and the boosters and everything else, and you're the new guy at Alabama, what a blessing to be able to have a guy like Jalen Milroe in your locker room who's saying, okay, I've done it before. I've been through the grind of an SEC schedule, and I succeeded. I got all the way up to the playoff. I won the conference last year. That's amazing for him to be able to do. If they let him walk out the door for somebody else, that's I think a big misstep. And I think that he is more than capable of adjusting his play style, adjusting his skill set, and working on his game enough to be able to find success in this offense.
So I've got a question for y'all. Whoever wants to take this first, go for it. And Garrett, maybe this is the start of a clip. Does Alabama need to look themselves in the mirror and learn from the Jalen Hurts experience, where we pushed another mobile quarterback out, had a rocket of an arm, but wasn't a pocket passer? We pushed him out in favor of a pocket passing quarterback, and Hurts went on to have obviously a tremendous rest of his collegiate career. He's a all-pro in the NFL. Just because a quarterback doesn't quote unquote fit your system doesn't mean that he can't win you ball games or have an extremely high ceiling. Is that fair to compare to Jalen Milroe's situation right now?
I think that's a really fair comparison. I actually really like the comparison. The difference is you're not guaranteed to have a Tua behind him. We think we know,
Sure.
like, hey, there's some good players behind him. There's some highly recruited guys behind him. Tua was a different level talent with passing the football and just his ability and his touch and everything else. If you think that you can guaranteed bank on that being behind him, okay, let him walk. If you're not 100% sure about that, again, Hurts is a guy who took them to the playoff and ultimately, doesn't end up, finishing any of those or winning any of those, which, kind of sucks for him. But it's a different story, I think, with Milroe because of the situation around him, right? It's not, I don't think, the same Alabama roster that they've had. They definitely don't have the quarterback behind him like Tua. And I think that this is a chance for them to, again, like I just said, like, take the blessing, take the fact that you've got an experienced quarterback and a crazy talented quarterback who has a huge arm. Like a lot of Washington's offense, like we kind of noticed last year, was just like, oh, well, Rome's down there somewhere. And it's just kind of chunked it up. And that was it. And so, like, I think Bama might have a guy or two on that roster who he could say, hey, like, you can just run fast and just get down the field, and we could just chuck it out to him and see what happens. Like, there's a couple of those guys on the roster. Yeah, there's some speedsters on the roster. So, like, Alabama's going to be fine if they don't step in it. I think DeBoer is a good enough coach to realize that. Obviously, you're not going to come out and just endorse a guy point blank because maybe he can't, right? He can't pick up your system. But assuming that, Milroe's not completely incompetent and assuming everything that we've seen about him doesn't stop, right? That he can't just all of a sudden not learn a new offense. Assuming that's not true, then we're going to be fine. And Milroe's going to go in there and he's going to do his thing.
I agree. And I totally agree that we saw him develop a lot on the field last fall. I think a lot of that was the Alabama coaching staff realizing maybe the mistake they did make with Jalen Hurts. I know it was completely different coaching staff from 2016 or whatever to 2023, but I think it was realizing, hey, we can't fit this square peg Jalen Milroe into the round hole of what we want to do on offense, and we don't have anybody else on the roster that can run the offense better. So we're going to tailor our play calling. We're going to tailor our strategy to his strengths. We're going to run the ball. We're going to use his legs, and we're going to chuck it downfield when we're opportunistic. That's just there was a lot of chucking it downfield on Washington's offense last year, but it was a ton of intermediate passing, multiple reads. I just don't know that what we saw on the field is going to be playing to his strengths as well as what the Bama coaching staff last year was willing to do. Now, it's going to mean Kalen DeBoer is just going to have to make a decision. Does he want to be a coach that has a system and only runs that system no matter what players he has? Or does he want to fit the players he has or does he want to fit his system to the players that he has? He's just going to have to make that choice. And I think when you're at a school like Washington, it's a little bit easier to run a system, right? I think back to, when Mike Leach was at Texas Tech, he had a ton of quarterbacks, and even at Washington State and Mississippi State as well, he had a ton of quarterbacks that ran that system well. They didn't do a lot in the NFL. None of them were wildly successful, other than maybe Gardner Minshew had his moment in the sun. But like,
Gardner Minshew's bank account would disagree with that, sir.
hey, he has made a lot of money. I think Graham Harrell made some nice money as a backup.
He did.
Cliff Kingsbury did too, but
Yeah.
none of them were stars in the NFL. Even though they put up 6,000 yards a year in college, they were system quarterbacks, and it worked at a smaller school. When you're at a school like Alabama, you are not going to be restrained to find a system quarterback. You're going to be able to go out and find an NFL-ready arm that's ready to go, or an NFL-ready athlete like Jalen Milroe. So he's just going to have to make a choice. What type of coach does he want to be? Does he want to be a guy that runs his system no matter what? Or does he want to tailor it to the players that he has on the field? I think he's going to be the latter. And I think you're going to see some adjustments that make Jalen Milroe work. But if they try to force him into what Michael Penix was doing last year, I just don't know that that's the best decision.
Well, Trey, you said it there. You don't have to be a system guy if you're at Alabama. You don't have to be just like a system coach who's got his thing. He doesn't have to be like, like you're saying, Leach or like Lincoln Riley or someone, right? He doesn't have to be that kind of a coach he's got his system. He knows what works for him and he goes with it. You're at Alabama. You can recruit with the best of them, go get the best players across the country. You can go get the best talent across the board. And then it's on you to pick amazing coaches and to pick, a great staff and put a whole program together. He doesn't need to run a system. He needs to run the program. And I think he can do that. Like, I think he's the right guy for the job. I think he's capable of doing that. But like, if he falls into the mistake of, no, this is my playbook. Like, this is what works. I'm 100%, this is me. We've seen that fail for a lot of coaches where there's loads of coaches that just go in and they say, this is my playbook. I know what I'm doing. I've done this. I've had success, and they don't change and they don't adjust. We've seen that happen to so many different coaches, and it's crashed and burned. And I really hope DeBoer doesn't make the same mistake and, go and say like, well, this is my square hole and I'm going to force the round peg and I'm going to make sure that has to happen. Like he doesn't need to do that. He can do whatever he wants to. He's at Alabama.
It's fair. I went down a glorious rabbit trail in the couple moments after Trey just slandered the Pirates' quarterback development skills. Relived the career of
college development. They were great.
Davis Webb.
They were great college quarterbacks.
Listen, tell you what, man. The New York Giants thought they found something there in Davis Webb for a hot second. And it didn't exactly pan out.
We all thought we found something with Davis Webb.
Oh,
was he a Leach guy or was Leach already gone when Davis Webb was there?
He was there. I'm pretty sure he was there at the start of his career overlapped with Leach. I could be wrong about that, but he just felt like a Leach guy to me. Yeah. So maybe I'm misremembering that. But fun player in college at Tech and then transferred to Cal and had a huge season at 6'5" for the Bears. And man, I really thought he might pan out in the NFL, at least do something. Didn't end up getting it done. I think all of your points are spot on. I really want to see Milroe get a fair shake, and I think he will. He's a tremendous athlete. Guys, remember, he went from losing the job at South Florida to being on the Heisman board late down the stretch of the season, right? I mean, Forrest and Milroe had the nation buzzing that, hey, Jalen's the guy. Jalen can take Alabama into an SEC championship game and beat Georgia. He went and did that. Didn't get it done in the playoff, but he's got a whole new season ready to go. And I think folks were largely still on his bandwagon, largely thinking, hey, this could work again for Alabama heading into a 12-team playoff with Nick Saban. Really, the only thing that's changed is the head man coaching and obviously a little bit more of a progressive system. I think in practicality, there's a good chance that a lot of those same Alabama looks still exist because there is a pro style to DeBoer's offense. But I'm excited to see what it looks like in Tuscaloosa. I know one of the doctors I work with, boy, he can't get enough what Kalen DeBoer is doing. All the reports coming out of T-Town, we're pumping hopium right back into the Crimson Tide fan base, man. They were at low tide there for a little bit.
I think we might be focusing on the wrong position, guys. I think Jalen just needs a center to snap him the ball, and he's going to be just fine. Did y'all see the tweet that tracked the most botched snaps last year?
Oh, no.
Yes, that was crazy.
Shout out Parker Fleming, Stats of War on Twitter. Great follow. 21 botched snaps by Alabama last year. Led the country. I don't know if you guys are big math people. I know Garrett's a little bit more than you and I, Mitch, but that is well over 1 per game. That is not good.
Well, I think those were like had an effect on the play, bad snaps, not just
that's not even just slightly off target. That is like,
yeah, it was such a bad snap that it affected the play to become a negative efficiency type of thing. Like it was insane. Well, because it was like Alabama was at 1, and then it was like a bunch of teams that had like just garbage seasons at like 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
and like
I got it pulled up. It's Buffalo at 2 with 20, Houston and Tech tied for 3rd at 15. Louisiana and Texas A&M and Sam Houston tied for 5th at 14.
Oh god!
Right, so nobody
A&M had to be up there.
And the fact that Alabama was in the playoff anyways and was quite literally a bad snap away from maybe winning a title, like exactly to that. And of course, everyone's going to focus on that one, but like again, that's not Milroe's fault, right? He can't control where the ball's coming when it's, getting snapped to him. If it's, at his feet, he's got to just scoop that thing and try to make something out of it.
McLaughlin might deserve a minor in bowling for as many snaps that rolled back to the quarterback. But hey, not Alabama's problem anymore. Will Howard, step on up, buddy. McLaughlin's up in Columbus. Might be. Boy, wouldn't that be terrible? We're talking about Ohio State being a national championship favorite and McLaughlin snapping gutter balls.
That has to make the preview show when we do that one. Got to write that one down.
No. Oh gosh. I mean, risk versus reward there is something. Certainly not rooting against the kid, but back of the napkin math it's not good. So let us know where you have Jalen Milroe. Should he be quarterback 1 of the Alabama Crimson Tide? I'd assume so for this season for sure. Or are you more excited about the Austin Macks of the world that have transferred in? It's Kalen DeBoer's guy, came in from Washington, highly recruited quarterback. Who ultimately is going to lead the Tide back to the promised land? Let us know at 3TechPod on all of our social channels.
Gracious, how about that?